right. I've got to tell a story before I introduce him. Mr. Dillon, who was in Dodge City, was talking to a guy who needed a job. He said, "Get a job on the what do they haul out there from one city to the next? Stagecoach. Get a job. Be a shotgun. Ride shotgun on a stagecoach." And the guy said, "I don't know how to." He said, "They'll tell you. They'll teach you." He got up on the stagecoach, was riding shotgun out there. And he said, "What do I do?" He said, "Watch for Indians." So he's looking way ahead. He said, "No, Indians don't come up from the front. They come up from the back." He turned around and looked back. He said, "I don't see any." He said, "Well, keep on watching." Finally, after about 2 or 3 hours, he saw some back there. He said, "How far back are they?" He said, "I can't tell." "How do you tell?" He said, "Well, it's how tall are they on the horizon?" He said, "They're about this tall. About this tall." He waited a couple hours, got there a little bit later, said, "Are they still back there?" Said, "They're still back there." The gang knows. "How far back are they?" He said, "I don't know. They're about this tall." And he finally got to there. He said, "Well, where are they now?" He said, "They're right at the back of the wagon here." He said, "Shoot them, shoot them." He said, "Shoot them. I can't shoot anybody I've known since they're this tall." I got to introduce a guy that I've known since he was this tall. Rick Perry and his sister Milla Perry were daughter and son of a good friend, a county commissioner from West Texas. I was president of the Judges and Commissioners Association. He and I worked together. He was on our board. And we'd meet in Austin from time to time, and he'd bring 2 beautiful little black curly-headed kids, both of them pretty as a picture, Rick and Milla Perry. I even picked Rick up a time or so. I can't pick him up now, but I would. He's a good man. He's a fine governor. He's a great governor. Let me tell you what he did. He got the teachers' pay up to where it ought to be, close to where it ought to be. There was a time when teachers worked mostly for seeing people go out and know that they could claim, they could work in and be satisfied with themselves and be proud of themselves. Their pay was what their students were. That's not fair to anybody. He got them up to a living wage and then also put a provision in there for those that were exceptional teachers. And I think that's good encouragement. He, I think, raised $634,000 in about 3 years in jobs, 6 different jobs. He's brought jobs to our state. I tell you, he's absolutely a budget battler. He's the first governor to cut the budgets instead of putting on taxes 2 years ago when we were billions of dollars in debt. This man has really represented the people. Rick and Milla, and he's an Eagle Scout, and I appoint youngsters to West Point and to the Naval Academy once a year there, and when they say they were an Eagle Scout, let me tell you, my board looks at them very closely. He was an Eagle Scout as a young boy. Clean as a pin, every way you look at him. My dear friend, a great friend, a good governor, a fine guy. You're going to like him here in Sulphur Springs, Rick Perry.
Hey, I heard you whacked your right wing. Me too, I got mine all done up in a thing. Mr. Ralph Hall, ladies and gentlemen, a great American. I'll get in the foxhole with him any day. Yes. We had about 434 more like him in Congress. Everything would be good in Washington, D.C. I know that for a fact. Ralph is right about one thing, is that he and my daddy were great and good friends. Matter of fact, I called Dad before I just got here and shared with him I was going to be on the stage with him. He said to tell you, howdy, Ralph. We came here every summer. The first 300-acre piece of land that my daddy rented back in the 1950s, Mr. A.W. Adams from Sulphur Springs, Texas, owned. And every summer after we got laid by, we loaded up and drove from just north of Abilene, Texas, to Sulphur Springs. Y'all didn't know you were such a metropolitan area. Bright lights, running water, y'all had it all over here. It was a wonderful place. And this old courthouse that is a great reminder of what freedom and liberty and justice is all about, was here in those days, it's here today. These are the reminders for all of us about what we're doing here today, saying thank you. Thank you to men and women who have sacrificed greatly to come to the defense of our freedoms. Some paying the ultimate sacrifice so that we could be here on this beautiful July evening celebrating our freedoms. It's good to be with people who understand that the shenanigans that are going on in Washington, D.C., these misguided attempts at social engineering, the threats to our freedom, the threats to our finances, the threat to our children's future, I hope and pray will be futile, that they will not be successful, because Americans have stood up to that type of issue and said no. Listen, folks that may be listening all across the country, we're not here to preach rebellion tonight. We're not here to preach subversion tonight. We're not here to preach insurrection, but to express our love for this great country, to discuss how to keep it from running off the cliff. That's what we're doing here tonight. We're part of a growing effort, a growing movement, if you will, across this country. Sensible people from every race and creed and political persuasion who just cannot abide the ongoing assault on our values that made our nation great, the freedoms that have set us apart. Being here this evening proves something to me. It proves that you understand the importance of liberty, but you also love this country so much that you're willing to take a stand for it. Raise your voice in defense of those freedoms. Are there some patriots out there tonight? Let me hear you. If you love your country, let me hear you say it. You better believe there's some patriots in Hopkins County. You know, there was a time in our nation's future, there was a time in our nation's history when people like you, patriots, they had to disguise themselves, to sneak around in Boston, if you will, cities up in the Northeast, in the dark. They risked their lives in order to send a message about unfair taxation. And I'm proud to be able to stand here 236 years later in the brightness of a beautiful Texas evening and show our faces to the world and tell the truth about the state of our nation. And you know what? And I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. The times are tough in America. When you look at our current economy, and there are problems that aren't going to fix themselves. And I'm at a loss. Ralph, I'm at an absolute loss how Washington and this administration can justify the approach that they're taking. You know, if anyone here is starting a business, any one of these small businesses around the square, if you think that you can borrow your way to prosperity, that you can spend your way to prosperity, you might want to consider taking a course in Economics 101. And I suggest the same class for all the people in Washington, D.C. And they might also want to take a refresher course on the United States Constitution. Our liberties would be a whole lot safer if those folks in Washington were sitting in a classroom learning a little Economics 101 instead of rampaging through the halls of Congress, overturning our rights one after another, making choices that I got to think would leave our founding fathers scratching their head about what's going on up there. Our founding fathers put limits on the federal government for a reason. There is a reason that the Constitution has the clear constraints. And the reason's because they saw what the British monarchy was doing. They were very concerned about this dangerous example that this faraway monarchy They understood what happens when government goes unchecked.